case that has commanded the eyes and the attention of the United States for decades now. We have our eyes on a Southern California courtroom in what could be a history-making day in American crime stories. You are seeing that old footage and the old pictures that tell the story of the Menendez brothers. We're talking about the saga of Eric and Lyle Menendez, found guilty of the shotgun murders of their parents back in the 1980s. Their story making a big documentary on streaming, but also that much talked about Netflix series called Monsters. The world watching to see what will happen. Now, they're about to appear in a courtroom as new evidence could mean the brothers walk free. So let's talk about the backstory here. Jose and Kitty Menendez, their parents, died of shotgun blasts inside their mansion in Beverly Hills in August of 1989. The timeline seen right here on this screen behind me. Eric and Lyle Menendez arrested and charged in their murders several months later. In between their arrest and the charges, a spending spree that made headlines. Hundreds of thousands of dollars that they got after their parents were murdered were spent. Things like Rolexes and cars, investing in a business. Well, fast forward, they were then arrested. They went on trial. That first trial happened. Evidence was allowed into that trial that talked about what the Menendez brothers said was years of emotional, sexual, psychological, and physical abuse at the hands of both of their parents. Well, that trial ended in a mistrial, and a lot of jurors at the time were split right down the middle with gender. A lot of women on the jury felt like they believed those abuse claims, felt like those were mitigating circumstances. The men on the jury did not buy what the Menendez brothers served up on the stand. So then there was a second trial. The jury in that case did not hear a lot of that abuse evidence, and that jury found them guilty of first-degree murder. That happened March of 1996. Well, fast forward to July, a judge sentenced them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And that's where they have been. You've seen them interviewed on network TV over and over, telling that same story of abuse. But then new evidence has come forward. Last year, May of 2023, the brothers' lawyers filed a petition with the court claiming that that new evidence supports their story, that the brothers were abused by their parents. Evidence that has now coming to light. And we're going to be talking about that evidence not seen in that first trial or the second trial. That was the evidence that a lot of people think if it had been seen, it wouldn't have landed them behind bars. So attorneys for Eric and Lyle hope the court will see this new evidence sufficient to toss out their convictions and potentially free them. And that brings us to the hearing today in Los Angeles County Superior Court. So let's bring in CBS News correspondent Elise Preston in Los Angeles. Elise, we know there's a resentencing hearing that is set for December 11th. What is this hearing about?
Well, good morning, Reed. Yes, there is a resentencing hearing set for the 11th. It could be rescheduled, however, because there are three different avenues that these defense attorneys are trying to get Eric and Lyle Menendez freed through. Now, this hearing today, they could bring up that habeas corpus petition that you brought up. Now, that new evidence is basically a letter that Eric Menendez wrote to a cousin that predates the murders, in which he outlined alleged abuse. There's also this testimony from a former Menudo boy band member who said that Jose Menendez also abused him as well. And so, as you mentioned, the defense argues that if any of this information would have come to light during that second trial, that the charges could have been changed. They may not have been charged with murder, but they could have been charged and convicted on manslaughter, which would have also lessened that time. They were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, and they've been behind bars for the last 30 years. So basically, what the judge could take up today is that habeas corpus petition, which actually just examines the legality of their imprisonment. Other than that, this is a scheduled status hearing in their quest to be released.
So, Elise, what's fascinating to me as it relates to today's experience, we're seeing cameras outside the courtroom, but not inside the courtroom. This case all along has been about cameras inside the courtroom. Why such strict rules today?
Yeah, it has been about cameras from the very beginning. Keep in mind this double murder happened in 1989. That first trial that ended in the mistrial was in 1994. And so in 1996, when they had that second trial where they were convicted, that judge did not want cameras in that trial. So this has been about cameras. What we did not see is just moments ago, we saw some people head into the courtroom. There was a lottery of just 16 seats that were offered to the general public. Some people got out here as early as 4 a.m. to try to get a chance at their lottery tickets just for a peek inside. That person who arrived at 4 tells us that they were a former classmate of Eric Menendez, and they did not get a lottery ticket despite lining up here in the cold at 4 a.m. So there's a lot of interest, no cameras in court. We will be inside. We do know that Eric and Lyle Menendez are expected to appear virtually, and their attorney tells us that they could speak.
All right, Elise Preston, thank you so much for being there. A touchstone to this story. We anticipate for our viewers that as soon as we start to hear and see anything that happens in that court case, we'll bring it to you this hour on CBS News 24/7. Elise Preston, thank you so much. So let's turn right now and get another live look, this time on the other side of the country at the White House, where the Biden administration is tracking the latest in a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now for more. You just got off the National Security Council call, Weijia. What are you hearing about a potential ceasefire?
Reed, it is great to be with you. That's right. John Kirby, who is a spokesperson for the National Security Council, briefed reporters and said even though there are media reports that say ultimately a ceasefire has been agreed to and now they are just trying to cross over the final line, he was very cautious about that because, Reed, we have been here before where the two sides appear to be ready to pull the trigger on something and then it falls apart. But Kirby did say that the trajectory is a positive one, although he said that nothing is negotiated until everything is negotiated. And so they don't want to signal any kind of victory or that this is complete until it's really been done, because as you mentioned, this is a critical piece of President Biden's foreign legacy agenda and his legacy. In fact, earlier this month when he hosted the president of Israel here at the White House, the hostage deal, a ceasefire deal, that really took up most of the conversation.
Well, we know at the White House today, the theme is all about range, heavy, weighty topics like that, and then not so weighty, not so heavy topics, at least if you're not a turkey. We're talking about two names that are making the headlines for our dinner time, Peach and Blossom, but they will not be part of dinner time. We just stay with me. Let's show our viewers what just happened at the White House.
Based on your temperament and commitment to being productive members of society, I hereby pardon Peach and Blossom.
All right, so Weijia, I have just such an important, heady question here. What can we expect from the President and First Lady and Peach and Blossom for the rest of the day? Will they be going out to lunch? Will they be going for a stroll on the White House lawn? The nation wants to know.
Well, they've been hanging out here in Washington, Reed. In fact, our colleague, the intrepid Ed O'Keefe, actually interviewed these two birds for the morning show, but they will be off to enjoy the rest of their time on an animal farm. They come here from Minnesota, and you know, this is a 77th year tradition for presidents here at the White House, this turkey pardon. And so they'll be happy to know they aren't going to end up on anyone's table. As far as President Biden, today he is going to Staten Island to meet with military families and take part in a Friendsgiving event along with the First Lady. And that's something they typically do every year. Usually, he goes to Nantucket with his family and has events there, but he is doing one a little bit earlier this year in New York. Reed.
And the leaves are still on the trees behind you, Weijia Jiang. It's nice to see you on a Monday. I'll be back after the Thanksgiving holiday, so I wish you and yours a beautiful Thanksgiving. And I'll be looking for your dinner time pictures on Instagram. Weijia Jiang, thank you so much, my friend. President-elect Donald Trump prepares for his next term in office. He announced a number of cabinet picks over the weekend. You heard Scott McFarland say he went beast mode over the weekend, including the intended nominees for Treasury Secretary, Department of Labor, Department of Agriculture, Department of Housing and Urban Development. And CBS News politics and attorney reporter Katrina Kaufman joins us from West Palm Beach to break all of this down. Okay, so he was busy. Scott McFarland said beast mode. He did it. Major cabinet picks announced. So what smaller positions remain yet to be filled?
We're still waiting for the U.S. trade rep position. Also, the head of the Council of Economic Advisors is another position that's yet to be filled. Potentially the FBI. This is not actually an available position. It's filled currently by Christopher Wray, but Trump has made it clear that he might want to replace Wray. So it's those and just a few other smaller positions that we're waiting for. As you mentioned, just on Friday, Trump announced 9 positions, one more Saturday. He's promised to do all of this before Thanksgiving, which is coming up.
Well, we also know that you have some CBS News polling that really takes the temperature on how Americans feel about Pete Hegseth leading the Defense Department. I want to get your reaction to this. 28% feel he's not a good choice. Another 39% say they haven't heard enough information about Hegseth. Does Donald Trump still back this pick, given the police report that came out of Monterey, California, and all of the controversy that we've seen?
Reed, so far Trump has been standing by his nomination of Hegseth, but you're right. In our polling, we definitely see trepidation in these numbers. The majority of Trump supporters are standing behind Hegseth as well, but there are a lot of concerns and controversy surrounding him. He has been accused of sexual assault from back in 2017. We've learned that he paid off the accuser, in fact, in a confidential financial settlement agreement. Just the other day, J.D. Vance was with Hegseth on the Hill talking to senators. They're really trying to get this nomination through. And our correspondent, Nicole Killian, asked him point blank if he had sexually assaulted this woman. Hegseth is maintaining his innocence. There's also been some controversy around a tattoo of his that's been affiliated with the Christian Crusaders and white supremacists. But so far, Trump, the team, when we've reached out, has said that he's highly qualified, that Hegseth has maintained his innocence. Although at the same time, Reed, just about a week ago, I asked Trump if he was standing by Matt Gaetz as the nominee, or if he was reconsidering him. In fact, Trump said no, but by the end of the week, Gaetz was out.
Yep, things changed within 24 hours after that. Katrina, another thing I want to ask you about, Trump cabinet picks Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk already looking to build their teams already. They want to start their government funding cuts on day one. What more can you tell us? Can they do this quickly, or do they have to wait for the process of government to play out?
So there is reporting that they are already starting to interview candidates for these positions, that Ramaswamy and Elon Musk have been spending their time at Mar-a-Lago and in Washington, talking to real Washington insiders, legal advisors, top tech experts. It's notable that Elon Musk has said that this work they're going to do in this new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, is going to be tedious and unpaid, but apparently they are finding people who want to be candidates for this job, and it's really going to be a monumental task, Reed. They say that they want to cut $2 trillion from the budget.
Okay, Katrina, we appreciate that update from West Palm Beach. You have a great weekend. We're watching a Los Angeles courtroom for a hearing in the case of Eric and Lyle Menendez, brothers in prison for murdering their parents. Will new evidence set them free? We're back in just a moment with that story and more. We'll continue watching our monitors for breaking news. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Look at that. That's happening right now over your head, wherever you are, north, south, east, and west in the United States. A lot of travel, a lot of planes in the sky. These monitors watching your holiday travels in real time. This is from FlightAware. It's their map. It's already showing that airports are very, very busy. In fact, think about this. AAA predicts 5 million travelers will be wheels up over the next several days. The skies are going to be dotted with a lot of you traveling there. And added to that travel stress this week, hundreds of service workers at Charlotte Douglas International Airport in North Carolina, they are on strike now for the next 24 hours. Union members say they want an end to what they call poverty wages and unfair labor practices. Well, in San Francisco, flyers on the move to get over the river and through the woods, so to speak. And CBS News' Veronica Macias joins us now to talk about travelers. Veronica, last week, San Francisco really saw some delays and cancellations because of that bomb cyclone-driven atmospheric river. What are you seeing by way of cancellations and delays today?
Well, at this hour, Reed, I could tell you that the number of delays are starting to climb here at SFO, despite the smooth sailing that we saw this morning. Right now, FlightAware is reporting about 300 flights have been delayed, but thankfully for passengers, the cancellations, that's staying low at 21. But like I said, there's been no major backups here at TSA. Things have been running smooth today. Passengers telling us that finding parking was tricky, which is why you want to give yourself plenty of time if you're going to be joining in this holiday rush at the airport. And one woman that we talked to had no choice but to travel for work this week, facing the crowds, and she tells us she only would have liked to have received that notification sooner about her delayed flight.
I'm traveling for work, definitely facing the crowds. I am a little frustrated, if I'm being honest, because my flight was at 10:50 scheduled to leave, and I just got a notification that it will not leave now until 1:57, and I won't reach Detroit until 9:30. So that was a little frustrating. I don't mind a delay, but if it could have been communicated sooner, that would have been way better for my day and my packing.
So some other passengers having no choice but to sit and wait for that flight. Others telling us, they don't mind having to wait. They don't mind the crowds, because when you work so hard, you want to make sure you enjoy that paycheck and you are home to enjoy that meal that your mother made perhaps at the Thanksgiving table.
All right, we appreciate her smile, but that is one heck of a delay. Almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon for takeoff. Better safe, I guess, but sorry. Thank you so much, Veronica. So let's bring in Jess right now. Yeah, last week, SFO saw so many delays and cancellations because of that atmospheric river, but Northern California started seeing a return of some of the rain.
Exactly. The rain's not done yet, the snow either. I mean, gosh, up into the Sierra, they're receiving anywhere from 1 to 4 feet of snow. So let's dive into that real fast. Heading over into California. All below me, you'll see winter storm advisories widespread throughout this region as we continue to see heavy rain and snow fall throughout California, the Cascades, and all the way over into the Rockies too, where the National Weather Service has advised us with winter storm warnings until Wednesday's forecast. That means that it will be a little bit challenging for the roads just along Colorado, Utah, all the way over into California too, if you're trying to get to your locations for Thanksgiving. And taking a look behind me, not only are we dealing with 1 to 4 feet of snow all the way up into the Sierra, but we're also expecting anywhere up to around 3 inches of rain still from that atmospheric river, wringing out more moisture into central California. This has been a pretty impressive storm. I mean, northern parts of the Bay Area, just near San Francisco, like Sonoma County, they got anywhere up to around 20 inches just last week alone, and we continue to add to those numbers as we head into this week's forecast. It's the rain that's impressive, but it's the snow that's even more impressive. We're expected to see anywhere up to around 20 inches of snow up near areas like Mammoth. And as you head over into the Rockies, we're expecting about 20 inches of snow within the next 48 hours over into Vail. We'll get a little dusting for our friends over near Park City, but overall very impressive when it comes to how strong this system has been. And we have also some rain in the forecast just in time for Thanksgiving over closer to New York. That could impact the parade, so we'll keep a very close eye on that.
Oh man, they have the balloons to fly.
They had the balloons to fly and some drizzle around the corner.
Can't mess with that. Jess, thank you so much. CBS News 24/7 watching a Southern California courtroom as the nation awaits word on the fate of Eric and Lyle Menendez, convicted of murdering their parents. Could new evidence see the brothers released? We have news in just a moment from a status hearing. When we see it, you see it. And here's more breaking news on CBS News 24/7 on that 2020 election fraud case against President-elect Donald Trump. Special counsel Jack Smith filed a motion to Judge Chutkan asking for those charges to be dropped. This comes as a result of Donald Trump's 2024 victory and Justice Department precedent that bans the prosecution of sitting presidents. So a reminder for our viewers, Smith charged Trump last year with plotting to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election after an exhaustive investigation about the events surrounding the insurrection at the Capitol building. So let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson right now on the stream. Okay, so Jessica, is this something that a lawyer or a legal scholar would have seen coming, given the fact that a sitting president cannot be examined or scrutinized or charged with a crime?
I think that you don't need to be a lawyer to have seen this coming. Elections have consequences. Reed, I think you and I were able to talk about what could happen to all of the criminal cases as a result of President Trump once again winning election. And I think what we see here is a couple of things happening. One, this is a federal case, and President Trump has said, the second I get in there, I would fire special counsel Jack Smith, and I would tell my attorney general to walk into court and dismiss this case. So he telegraphed very specifically.
And Jessica, we understand a CBS News special report is happening right now. We'll continue this conversation on the other side of that.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Nancy Cordes. Breaking news from Washington. CBS News has learned special counsel Jack Smith has filed to dismiss the D.C. federal case against former President Donald Trump. The Justice Department charged Trump last year with plotting to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. This dismissal comes after Trump won the presidential election a few weeks ago. The Justice Department has a policy against prosecuting sitting presidents. The dismissal says, in part, that prohibition is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution. To discuss that, I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane. He has been covering developments in this investigation and the other cases pending against Donald Trump since the beginning. Scott, in layman's terms, what does this mean?
This historic case against Donald Trump for allegations he tried to conspire to overturn an election and with ties to that horrific attack on the Capitol January 6th. That case is dying with a whimper today. A 6-page narrow filing from the special counsel saying can't charge a president or try a president for a crime when he is the president. In the words of Jack Smith, it's an undue burden on a future President Trump to have this criminal prosecution. What's more, and what's particularly noteworthy in this filing, Nancy, is Jack Smith says we can't even hold this in abeyance until 2029 and the end of his second and final term, that's too much of a burden on a president, too. This case must be dismissed, Jack Smith argues. No doubt Donald Trump's team will agree to this dismissal. It goes back to the D.C. federal judge who's navigated this case for 16 months, Tanya Chutkin, to decide whether to accept this dismissal. There's no indication in any of this case so far she would do anything but follow what the prosecutors recommend.
And Scott, what about the other case that Jack Smith has been spearheading in Florida, the classified documents case?
Yeah, the second federal criminal prosecution of Donald Trump, also by Jack Smith, was dismissed by the judge in Fort Pierce, Florida, just days after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. She had cited some Supreme Court language that the special counsel may not have been lawfully appointed, so she dismissed on those grounds. Jack Smith has been trying to appeal that and bring that case back up, resuscitate it. There's no indication based on today's filing he'll continue with those efforts either. But again, Jack Smith was being passively, indirectly urged this weekend, including by Senator-elect Adam Schiff, to consider just hitting the pause button on this until 2029. But he makes it quite clear in this filing, Nancy, there's no pause button. This case is to be dismissed. Of course, the Supreme Court reviewed this case at length this year over the issue of presidential immunity and granted Trump some version of presidential immunity. Jack Smith went back to a second grand jury, got a second indictment on the same felony charges to bring this case after the Supreme Court's determination. Now he's saying, drop the case.
And so this has more to do with the fact that Trump won the election than it has to do with the merits of the case. Jack Smith isn't saying anything about whether he believes in these charges or not.
Yeah, the argument Jack Smith's making is a procedural one, that because he is going to be the president-elect, because on January 6, 2025, he'll be certified as the winner, on January 20th, he'll be inaugurated, that the policy is clear. You can't bring criminal cases against a sitting president. He's not making an argument that he believes his case has been weakened, that his case has any flaws, or that there's a problem with evidence. It's just that he can't try a sitting president.
And Smith is assuming his days are numbered, right?
Donald Trump has made explicit and unequivocal that he would fire Jack Smith, I think within minutes or seconds of taking office, if Jack Smith doesn't stand down on his own before January 20th. This case was going to end either way. And it's worth noting, Nancy, there were some deadlines between the Supreme Court ruling July 1st and Election Day that Jack Smith kind of let come and go. I think recognizing that this case was going to rise or fall with the election, that the case wasn't going to happen if Trump won. So he almost hit the brakes a bit later in this year, waiting for the election results. And here they are. And his motion to dismiss follows, just 3 weeks after the election.
Scott McFarland, thank you so much for breaking it down for us. I appreciate it. I want to go now to Nicole Killion, who is in West Palm Beach, Florida, covering the president-elect. And Nicole, I assume this is going to be welcome news to Mr. Trump.
Yeah, I think that is a fair assumption, Nancy, because we certainly know that the president-elect has had his criticism of Jack Smith and called this entire case a witch hunt among the many cases and charges that he has faced over the last couple of years. But this is certainly a noteworthy move on the part of Jack Smith, although we are still waiting to see if Judge Chutkan grants this request. As of now, we have not seen any reaction from the president-elect on his Truth Social account or through any other means. But as you say, this will likely be met with a lot of relief on the part of the president-elect. I think it's also worth noting, certainly, that there is the election interference case that is still pending in Georgia, which continues to be on ice. So unclear whether or not this federal case will have any bearing on that state case down in Georgia as well.
So one less criminal case to worry about, possibly. Nicole Killion in Florida, thank you. I want to bring in Jessica Levinson, CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor. Her work focuses on constitutional law, election law, and the Supreme Court. Jessica, so good to have you with us. So does this mean that Donald Trump no longer has to worry about this case at all? It goes away completely?
Almost certainly. As Nicole just said, we're going to wait for Judge Chutkan, the trial court judge here, to say yes or no when it comes to this request to dismiss the case. I think the chances are extremely high that the judge says yes, in part because of all the reasons that Jack Smith lays out in this 6-page filing, in part because there's some question about whether or not she even has the discretion to say no, and frankly, who she could even appoint to continue prosecuting the case. I think all of this points to the idea that Jack Smith and others saw where this was going and decided, for the reasons that you've been talking about, because the president is different from the rest of us, because continuing with a criminal case against a sitting president is something that we have not envisioned, that Jack Smith said, no, I'm dismissing this. As Scott said, interestingly, there's nothing here that says, let's hold it in abeyance. Let's stay until the end of the presidential term. This is, we are dismissing. And therefore, to your question, I think this means this is off of the worry list for Donald Trump, unless there's some strange situation where they would try to refile. I think that would be very unlikely at the end of the presidential term.
And Jessica, why do you think that is, that they didn't propose hitting pause? I mean, we saw in the hush money case in New York just a week or two ago that the prosecutors there said, OK, wait, maybe you wait to sentence Donald Trump until 2029. Maybe we just wait for 4 years. But that's not what Jack Smith is saying.
That's not. And this is such an important question. And I think it's due to a couple of things. One is where this case is. And Jack Smith is saying even the idea, as we've quickly read this filing, even the idea that this could be hanging over the president's head for the entirety of his administration, that's the type of burden that we want to guard against. Now, whereas the New York case, there's frankly, I think, very little hanging over the president's head in comparison. That is a situation where the jury has already convicted him. And the only question is one of sentencing. There's not a question of, will we proceed to trial? What will the trial look like? Will he have to sit as a criminal defendant? And will there be any motion practice during a presidential administration? So those particular cases are at very different places. Again, when it comes to the DC election interference case, obviously never even went to trial. Now we think it never will. The New York case went to trial and the jury convicted. Much less for the president to do other than just to sit there for a sentencing potentially in 4 years. And let's remember a sentencing where it's very unlikely that he would get any time in prison.
That is such an important distinction, and part of the reason that Jack Smith had been pushing for so long for a speedy trial in this case. Jessica Levinson, legal expert, thanks so much. I want to go now to CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Weijia, President Biden has a history of refusing to weigh in on President-elect Trump's legal troubles, and in fact, these days, he seems to avoid weighing in on his successor at all.
Nancy, that's right. You know, recently President Biden hosted President-elect Trump here at the White House for a meeting that lasted just about 2 hours. And after that, we have heard very little from President Biden himself about what they spoke about, any notes that he passed along, any agenda items that he wanted to focus on, even though we know before this meeting during the campaign, President Biden was very clear and explicit in describing what he claimed were threats that Trump posed, even calling him a fascist at one point. And you're absolutely right. This White House, especially Biden, has gone to great lengths to separate themselves from any of Trump's legal cases, even especially this one and the ones that we have just laid out today. That doesn't mean, though, Nancy, that they haven't expressed their belief that Trump was responsible and played a role in inciting the riots that we saw on January 6th, 2021. That said, so far we have been pinging our White House officials and sources, and they have not weighed in yet on this monumental decision. But on a tangential note, Nancy, I think it is important to remind viewers what President Biden has said about the Supreme Court immunity ruling that would apply to future presidents as they acted in their official capacity. He said it was a dangerous precedent because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. But as for this decision by Jack Smith, Nancy, so far we are still waiting to hear from the White House.
Weijia Jiang at the White House. Great point. Thank you so much. And breaking news once again, special counsel Jack Smith has moved to dismiss the 2020 federal election interference case against President-elect Donald Trump. He cited a long-standing Justice Department policy shielding sitting presidents from prosecution. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Nancy Cordes in Washington.
And back to that CBS News 24/7 coverage of this withdrawal by Jack Smith of what has been a case that has dominated headlines. We just got the words of Jack Smith in that filing. We wanted to share it with you here on CBS News 24/7. Mr. Smith writes, as a result of the election held on November 5th, 2024, the defendant, Donald J. Trump, will be inaugurated as president on January 20, 2025. He goes on to say it's long been the position of the Department of Justice that the United States Constitution forbids the federal indictment and subsequent criminal prosecution of a sitting president. He then goes on to write, that prohibition is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which the government stands fully behind. Based on the department's interpretation of the Constitution, the government moves for dismissal without prejudice of the superseding indictment under federal rule of criminal procedure there. But there's a little bit of a distinction there. It's saying because of this federal criminal procedure, as it stands to sitting presidents, they are going to have to follow that. However, Jack Smith writes that this is not to turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which he continues to say the government stands fully behind. CBS News 24/7 will continue having coverage on this breaking news of that 2020 election fraud case against President-elect Donald Trump, which now is gone. Now let's go right now to Robert Laguerre. He is going to join us for a conversation and continue this. Robert, I thought this was very interesting, that distinction between what is procedure as it is in the Constitution relative to a crime facing a sitting president of the United States, but also Jack Smith getting in a 1-2 punch there saying we still stand fully behind the charges.
Hey, yeah, good afternoon, Reed. Thanks for having me. So in the 6-page filing, you're right. Jack Smith is saying he and his team stand by the merits of the case, but point to Justice Department policy saying that a sitting president can't be prosecuted for a federal crime. This is a long-standing policy that the Justice Department has held previously ran into during the Mueller investigation. And so this is longstanding department policy. We expected this based on our reporting here at CBS News. We expected that Jack Smith was going to be winding down these cases, the 2 cases he has against President-elect Trump. In these cases, in this DC case, he alleged 4 counts that he charged, amounting to what he alleged was a scheme to stay in power after the 2020 election. The other case is in Florida. That's a case in which Trump previously faced dozens of counts related to his alleged illegal retention of national defense information, classified documents, and obstructing an investigation. That case was already dismissed. Jack Smith is now appealing that dismissal, basically on grounds that he says that he was illegally appointed, disagreeing with the previous court's ruling. He's appealing that. We're waiting for his decision there and what he's going to do. But here at CBS News, we're reporting that he's working on winding down that case as well. And so what we expect is that Smith is going to likely file something similar, saying we stand by the case, we stand by the legality of our charges, but in the end of the day, we can't bring this case anymore because he is the president-elect.
And Robert, our viewers today are going to be hearing this phrase a lot, hold in abeyance. Why will this not be held in abeyance, and what does that mean? Oh, there's Nicole Killian. Robert, we're going to talk to Nicole Killian in just a minute, but I'll let you answer that question.
Oh, so no, feel free. All I was going to say was this is not going to be held in abeyance because the former president is now the president-elect. And so what's happening now is the Justice Department is moving to dismiss these charges outright. And so this is something they can't hold these charges anymore because, as we've been talking about, the prosecution will no longer be happening.
And Robert, does this mean that this just goes away forever?
It does. At the moment, it does. That's right. So what we do expect is that Jack Smith will be resigning from his post at the end of this presidential term, Joe Biden's term. He was appointed in 2022 by Merrick Garland to serve as special counsel. Our reporting here is telling us that he is likely to resign or leave office before Trump is sworn in. That is the likely trajectory now. And so then once the prosecutor's office is closed, there's nothing more to do.
Nothing more to do. Could this affect how other cases that the president faces be dealt with?
Well, as we were mentioning, there was the case before the 11th Circuit, the classified documents case, which is before the appeals court, and we expect a similar trajectory there. The other 2 cases Trump faces in New York, that conviction in New York and the hush money case, that case was supposed to be sentenced this month, but that was delayed based on the complexities around him being the president-elect. And then to be determined on the Fulton County, also related to the 2020 election. Not sure where that's going yet, but at the moment, that's on hold.
And while we wait to talk to Nicole here in just a moment, I want to ask you another question. Senator-elect Adam Schiff of the state of California, relative to that New York case, is saying, look, let's not throw this out. We can wait until after Donald Trump is no longer president to continue there. Do you think any of that narrative that's starting to bubble up, just put this one on hold, will hold with the judge or the DA there?
Good question. I think that's yet to be seen. I think what's important to remember in all of these cases is that there was conduct that was charged here. The conviction in the New York case is a bit different. Here in the DC and the Florida cases, these were pre-trial, right? So we were going through these pre-trial motions. And so there wasn't really anything on the books yet other than these charges. And it's worth noting that Trump and his legal team, he both pleaded not guilty and denied wrongdoing. And his legal team succeeded quite efficiently at delaying the case in D.C. based on the presidential immunity decision, and then getting the case thrown out in Florida based on the argument that Jack Smith shouldn't have been appointed at all and was unlawfully named special counsel. And so the trajectory of these 2 cases, even if the election hadn't gone Trump's way, was very uncertain. We didn't know how the judge in D.C. was going to apply the Supreme Court precedent. We didn't know how the 11th Circuit was going to rule on the appeal on Judge Eileen Cannon's ruling. So there's a lot of uncertainty there in all of Jack Smith's cases that now are not so uncertain.
All right, we've got it in writing. Thank you so much for talking to us today on CBS News 24/7. Let's continue the conversation with CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. Nicole, a lot of people are saying, as you join us there from Florida, that this was no surprise. Any indication what the Trump camp has to say about this?
Yeah, well, we just got a statement from the president-elect's communications director, Stephen Chung, and I'm just going to read this to you directly. He says the American people reelected President Trump with an overwhelming mandate to make America great again. Today's decision by the DOJ ends the unconstitutional federal cases against President Trump and is a major victory for the rule of law. He goes on to say that the American people and President Trump want an immediate end to the political weaponization of our justice system, and we look forward to uniting our country. So again, that statement coming from Trump Communications Director Stephen Chung. But clearly, as far as President-elect is concerned, they never saw this investigation or this case as legitimate. The President-elect time and again even called Jack Smith a deranged and many other names over the course of this investigation. So certainly this is welcome news on the part of the Trump team. And as you heard Rob mention, obviously there are still other cases out there pending with respect to election interference, most notably down in Georgia, although that case has long been stalled for many, many months now over the fate of the district attorney down there. So at this point, it's unclear what impact or bearing dismissing this federal case could potentially have on that state case down in Georgia. But either way, this clears a major hurdle for the president-elect going forward.
And speaking to the New York case, which we do have convictions, because we are talking about the difference between charges and convictions, that New York case, the Trump camp also would like to see that one dismissed altogether. What is next where their efforts are concerned for just entire dismissal?
Yeah, well, we know that there are some additional hearings pending next month, so we will have to see how the process plays out there. But yes, the hope is that certainly on the part of the president-elect and his team is that that case could be dismissed. Again, we will have to see how things play out. But as we know, the president-elect has been very critical of these cases and charges against him. He has argued that he has been politically targeted, and you are seeing that in some of the selections he most recently made for his cabinet, most notably Matt Gaetz, who ultimately stepped down as Attorney General designate. But part of the reason the president-elect initially named him is he wanted someone who could shake up the Justice Department because he was so enraged by the way a lot of these cases were handled by the department. So that being said, obviously there's a new pick now, Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, but still a lot of concern on the part of the president-elect and many Republicans about the Justice Department and its fate going forward.
Nicole Killian, thank you so much for joining us on the stream after you've just been on national television as well with our team in New York. We appreciate you so much. Thank you. When we come back, more on this breaking news in Jack Smith's case against Donald Trump, which is now no longer a case. It is gone. Plus, we're watching another case out of Southern California. The Menendez brothers, the double slaying of their parents, and the question, should new evidence let them walk free? It's a busy day on CBS News 24/7. Stay with us. You're watching CBS News 24/7, and that breaking news on the 2020 election fraud case against President-elect Donald Trump. It is no more. Special counsel Jack Smith filed a motion to Judge Chutkan asking for those charges to be dropped. They will go in the history books now. This comes as a result of Donald Trump's 2024 victory and Justice Department precedent that bans the prosecution of sitting presidents. A reminder for our viewers, Jack Smith charged Trump last year for plotting to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election after an exhaustive investigation about the events surrounding the insurrection at the Capitol building. So we're going to continue our conversation now with CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joining us now for more. Jessica, I just got my hands on Jack Smith's actual language. I want to run this part of it by you. He says, that prohibition is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which the government stands fully behind. If I'm interpreting that, I'm taking that as Jack Smith is doing this because it's procedural, not because he doesn't believe in the case that he built. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think he's saying, we think this is a strong case. This has nothing to do with the case that we brought, the strength of the evidence, the law behind us. What it has to do with is the fact that President Trump won the election. And there's an Office of Legal Counsel memo, in fact, 2 of them, that say you don't prosecute a sitting president and this case never went to trial. And we could have long conversations about why it didn't go to trial and the timing. But I hear him say, I have no choice, but make no mistake, I'm not saying anything about the strength of our case. In fact, I think what he's saying pretty clearly is we still think it's a strong case. It's just not a case that's going to be brought, at least not until the end of this president. I know you've been talking about this. The language, I think, leaves open the possibility that the case could be refiled after the presidential term. I don't think that's likely, but that would be the only scenario really where you could see this case revived.
So the reporting that this is open and shut forever is not true. They could feasibly have a window that after his presidency, they could go back into this.
Well, Jack Smith is saying dismiss without prejudice, which means there's the possibility that you could refile. I just don't see it. Now, I will say there's two more hurdles left. One is he's saying we want to dismiss. A judge still has to say okay. I do think that Judge Chutkan, the federal judge here, will say okay. And then two, we have to determine whether or not she says with or without prejudice, assuming, again, she does say we can dismiss the case. If it's dismissed with prejudice, that means you can't refile. If it's dismissed without, then the argument they could make is, well, the statute of limitations, meaning the time limit on bringing these claims, that basically is paused. And so they could refile at the end of the term. I don't know that they would do that. But the first thing they would need to do if they did is they still have to tackle whether or not this case goes away because of the Supreme Court's decision in that big immunity case.
All right, so we will be listening for with or without prejudice. Really quickly, before we talk about another major case, I just want to ask, how soon do you think Judge Chutkan will rule on this?
She could set this very quickly. Obviously, I don't think the defense will oppose this motion to dismiss. And she could decide to have a hearing. She could decide just based on the papers, which I think is probably more likely than not, given that there's agreement between the parties. I'm specifically saying very quickly and not, I think it's going to be Wednesday or I think it's going to be Monday, because that I just don't know.
All right, Jessica, while we have you on, we just got some breaking news attributed to the Associated Press, the Justice Department also abandoning the charges in the classified documents case. That was fast.
This is the day where everything is winding down. Now, the classified documents case, Reed, as you've been talking about, is in a different place. That case actually was dismissed by the trial court judge, Judge Eileen Cannon, not based on the allegations, but based on her conclusion that special counsel Jack Smith was not properly appointed. That question was, I was about to say is, but was up on appeal before the 11th Circuit. That's a circuit court in that area. At this point, it looks like Jack Smith is going to say, just like he is for the DC election interference case, we have to wind these cases down. Again, you don't prosecute a sitting president. And it looks like both of these federal cases, as we suspected, but for different legal reasons, will be concluding.
So, Jessica, we have about 40 seconds left in show. These are two very big dominoes to fall in the favor of the president-elect. What will this do to the other cases, just by way of a messaging standpoint, to others who have the power to decide the fate of the other cases he's facing?
So I actually don't think anything to a certain extent, because these are the federal cases. The Georgia case, I think, goes away for other reasons, but partly because you're not going to, as a state, bring a case against a sitting president. And the New York case has already concluded. So that's just really a question of sentencing. Sorry.
Jessica Levinson, it's always great to talk to you. Some major breaking news here on CBS News 24/7. We'll continue with Jessica and our experts all around the country and our reporters around the country digging into Jack Smith, this news that Donald Trump is free and clear where that case is concerned.